Yes, I want to talk about crafting human-AI reflexive practice in the context of child toy design. And I want to start by talking about the way that we all look at the world around us. In a way, we create a lens through which we navigate through the world, through which we make sense of the world around us. And our families, our cultures, everything and everyone in our environment is part of shaping those lenses. The only problem is that while we so very confidently look at the world through our lenses, we remain oblivious of the fact that this is not reality. That's just our way of looking at it. And we overlook all those social roles and norms and values because they became so natural in the way we perceive the world. And nowadays we have AI, and we see a similar problem. We see all those worldviews and biases and roles reflected in the AI through the training data that we give it. And that is quite bad because it ends up exacerbating inequality and reinforcing stereotypes and perpetuating injustice. But that's, of course, a big problem, and there have been many people thinking about how to fix that problem by looking at ways we can mitigate bias, aiming at eliminating these kind of worldviews and the way they are represented in the training data or in the systems. However, I argue that there's something very interesting in the fact that AI can represent and reflect these lenses that we so subconsciously shaped. And I started 3 design experiments in which I looked at, through the AI, at myself, in order to surface the values I've internalized, the roles and norms, and how I materialize them in the designs that I create. And I tried to envision alternatives to those narratives. And I've been looking particularly at the toys, because I see them as these ultimately gendered products, very heavily stereotypically designed, targeting either boys or girls. And I wanted to create something queer, something that doesn't fit this binary distinction between masculinity and femininity. In the first experiment, I wanted to create a robot doll. And you get the idea, so a robot representing masculinity and masculine features and attributes, and femininity represented by the doll. So I wanted to create something between these two. And I started by making a data set with 2 categories, masculinity and femininity. And for those who were there last year, I gave a workshop where we did exactly this. So we very quickly and intuitively tried to classify things in our environment into either one of those 2 categories. And then I trained the classification algorithm on what essentially is my lens of gender. And the AI kind of creates its own lens based on the data that I give it, and it presents it with this measure for masculinity and femininity. And what I did is I presented all my design iterations to this lens, and I challenged it with that measure that the AI created, ultimately aiming for something that is fairly balanced between those 2 categories, so that cannot be easily distinguished as either masculine or feminine. And it's through these iterations that I learned something about the gender cues and the way they materialize in color and shapes, and I could become more deliberate in the ways that I incorporate those cues in my design to ultimately evolve to an object that is, inherently queer. In the second experiment, I looked at a dino unicorn toy. I again started by making the data set. However, this time I scraped a whole bunch of images of plushes from the internet, so dinosaur plushes and unicorn plushes. Again, we have these representations of the binary gender distinctions here. And this time I trained the classification style gun on those data. And what you can do, at least when you use Runway and L for that, is you get this latent space. It's like a visual representation with all these kind of images that are related. And I searched that space for creatures that didn't really fit my understanding of masculinity and femininity, that puzzled me, that confronted me with something that I thought of impossible. And what you can also do is you can search that space for things that very much represent your idea of a dinosaur or masculinity or a unicorn in femininity. And you can interpolate between them. You can say, show me that there is an infinite space between what I think is binary. And it, of course, leads this idea of binary to the absurd, because obviously there is an infinite space between. And you can pick kind of whatever inspires you for a design. And in the last experiment, I wanted to create a drill hairdryer. Again, I looked at a bunch of images, collected a bunch of images from the internet. But this time, I started training the style gun first with a whole lot of images of toy drills, until after 7 hours of training or so, I got these kind of images, so something that I would at least confidently identify as a drill. And I would train it for like another half an hour, 45 minutes on the images of the hairdryer. And what you get is this weirdly alienated drill that has some kind of familiarity with both the drill and the hairdryer, yet it's neither really. I could see this, for instance, it still has this affordance of grabbing. So you could, for instance, train motor skills of children without having these strong associations to who is supposed to play with it, the roles that are associated with the play. But training certain skills would still be possible. And all of these kind of confrontations and iterations I used to eventually create these 3 toys that you may or may not have seen also standing outside in the exhibition. The third one, unfortunately, didn't survive long after the picture was taken. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.